Good morning, everybody.
Hi,
Good
good
morning, ma'am.
morning, Divya.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There's some noise coming. Damini?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm muting myself.
No problem. Hi, good morning. I believe there are a few people yet to join, so we'll give them another 2-3 minutes. Till then, we're going to do like a small recap of what all we did yesterday. Can anybody give me a short, summary or some recap of what all we did yesterday? Today we'll try to go a little faster so that because I need to cover a little more than what I did yesterday. So quickly, can somebody summarize what all we did yesterday? I think
Yes,
today
ma'am, I can try.
yeah, please.
Yeah. So, ma'am, yesterday we started with the basics of ratio, that why do we need, who will need to do the ratios, like stakeholders, shareholders, and what will they get from using ratios. And as you rightly said, that we even unknowingly use ratios in our day-to-day lives. Okay. Then we covered
Hmm.
DuPont analysis. What is DuPont analysis? Then the three important parts of DuPont analysis, that are
Everybody
profitability,
remembers
asset.
what are the 3 important components of DuPont analysis? I hope everybody remembers what are the 3 components of return on equity. Go ahead, Sneha, go ahead.
Yeah. So the three important components is profitability, asset use efficiency, and financial leverage.
Right.
And then we brushed upon a bit on what is the link between balance sheet and P&L.
Right.
Then how companies will increase the return on equity, and what is
Right.
revenue. You were covering the basics of revenue, COGS. You told us a bit about that. And then we went to
Right.
asset turnover ratio, that is a fixed asset turnover ratio and working capital turnover ratio. And
Right.
then you also brushed upon the concept of financial leverage, whether it is good or bad for the company. It depends on the company's capacity to pay the debt. Uh, then you
Right.
covered gross profit margin, net profit, net sales, and you gave us sums on net profit, net sales, net profit ratio, and also you covered the gross profit ratio.
Great. Great, Sneha. It was actually a great way to recap and begin this session. I hope
Thank
everybody's on the same page. I think we have like maybe 2-3 people who are yet to join. Damini, should I start or should I still wait for some people who are yet to join? Damini? Okay. So what I'll do is I'll begin. In case somebody joins in later and has any confusion, I'll repeat for that person. All right. So guys, can you firstly see my screen? I have, yeah, everybody can see my screen, right? Guys, so I actually, when I'm showing my screen, sometimes I have a little bit of delay in checking the chat. Okay. All right. So yesterday we had covered one part of profitability ratios. Today we're going to cover the other part of profitability ratios, which is nothing but the return ratios. Now, by the term return, what do you mean? What do you mean by return? And given that it comes under profitability, what do you think would return ratios cover? Guys, you can also unmute yourself if you want to start talking because sometimes I miss out on chat because I'm presenting my screen. Anybody? Again, let me just pick someone then. Manisha, why don't you tell me what do you think we'll cover under return ratios? What would return ratios signify given that they are a
Return
part of
return ratios basically how we are utilizing the sources of our business, be it assets, if we
Manisha,
have.
actually I can't hear you. Can you speak a little loudly? I can't hear you.
Hello, is it audible now?
Yeah, Yeah, it's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, return ratios are basically to know that how beneficially and how we are utilizing the assets or resources invested in the company. Basically, it can be the funds we have invested in form of equity or the assets which we have invested in the company. So at the end of the year, the management wants to know how we are utilizing it, whether we are utilizing it properly or not. So we calculate the return on the basis of the asset which we have invested in the company.
Okay. So return ratios in a layman form would mean that what kind of returns is the company generating for its shareholders. Okay, just by the definition of return ratios. So return ratios, obviously, I will be taking you through three types of return ratios. Return on equity we have already covered, though I'll still give you a brief about it again. Return on assets and return on capital employed. So basically, return ratios do nothing but try to measure the annual return that an investor would get for every unit of investment that is made in a business. Let me just go on to the return ratio slide. Just give me 1 second. Yes, so return ratios is nothing but the annual return that an investor would get for every unit of investment. Just like I said, that it's the company's ability to generate return for its shareholders. So yesterday we'd already discussed, right, that okay, let me give you another example and discuss about it. Just 1 second. Company A, company B. Okay, now company A
Madam,
earns 50
hello,
rupees profit. Hello.
ma'am, Siddharth
Yeah.
here. So,
I,
yield is a part of return, or so whatever yield we count in a manufacturing organization. So,
sorry,
is the
sorry. Can
same.
you, Siddharth, can you start again? Sorry, my
Uh,
volume was low. I missed what you were saying. Yeah.
Actually, returns. We are talking about returns, correct? So, whatever
Yeah.
yield we count in a manufacturing organization is a part of return.
Whatever, what do we get in a
Yield,
manufacturing
yield,
organization?
yield means
Whatever yield,
per per
whatever
unit.
yield,
Tell me.
whatever, why specifically manufacturing organization?
Because we are using raw material and
So
inventories.
yield would, you mean to say you yield in terms of whatever like output in terms of
Per unit,
whatever that particular organization is manufacturing that produce, right? So
right?
you're saying that is the return? No. So Siddharth,
No.
that is not
Oh,
the return. That is the output. All right.
output. Okay,
So
okay,
see, for
okay. Right, right.
example, okay, so now, so like let's take, okay, you said, say some organization which is into, say, manufacturing of or providing of crops. Okay. Now that crop, of course, once they get the output of it, or say, let's say a company which is manufacturing biscuits, okay, it's selling biscuits. Biscuits is the output. It is the sale of biscuits by which I am generating profits. I will get return for my
Right.
shareholders through the sale of the biscuits. But the biscuits are not the return in itself, because
Okay, okay.
biscuits kept in my organization are nothing but just a finished product which I am going to sell and generate profits, or
Okay.
I'm going to sell and generate returns. Do you understand? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
Got it.
particular output in itself is not return or not profit for me. It is just an output at that time. Once I sell it, then also it is not profit, then it is revenue. I sold it,
Correct.
it is revenue. Then after I subtract whatever costs I incurred, or expenses such as taxes, etc. Once I subtract those things from that revenue, then I will be able to calculate my return or profit. Do you
Okay.
understand?
Right, right.
So
Got it.
yield is not your return or your profit, it is just simply your output.
Output. Okay.
Okay.
There's some confusion.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks.
okay, no problem. So yeah, I was here, right? Company A, let's say, is generating a profit of rupees 50, and company B is, say, generating a profit of rupees 100. And just like we spoke about yesterday, wherein I said that absolute numbers in itself do not say anything, and just by looking at this, you may say that company B is better than company A. But the moment I add another variable to this, which is equity investment, say that company A made an equity investment of 50 rupees and company B made an equity investment of rupees 1000. So that very moment, you will be able to understand that only saying that higher profit is a company which is making higher profit is better than a company which is making lower profit is a misconception the moment I added equity investment, because that is the very time when you said that you made a comparative analysis by saying that 50 rupees profit was on 50% equity investment, and here 100 rupees profit was on 1000 rupees investment. So only by looking at profits, you cannot say that which company is doing better or which company is doing worse. Now we're going to talk about return on equity, return on assets, and return on capital employed. Return on equity, like we yesterday spoke about, is the profitability ratio which actually measures a company or an organization's ability to generate profits from its shareholders' investments in the company. It is nothing but profit after tax. Guys, I hope you all remember I made that whole. I'll do it again. Okay. Yeah. So, where was I? I was on return on equity ratio. So, return on equity is nothing but your return, which is your profit after tax, on what is the profit that you have earned on the equity share capital that is invested in a particular company. So basically, in simple words, it is nothing but how much profit each rupee or each dollar or whatever currency in which the equity is invested in, how much profit each rupee of common stock shareholders equity generates. So if I say invest 50 rupees profit. So for every 1 rupee, I earned 1 rupees profit, right? So return on equity is nothing but profit after tax divided by equity share capital. So guys, today I'm going to cover a couple of ratios and then do questions, because yesterday I only covered, I couldn't meet the target of the slides that I wanted to cover yesterday. Guys, if anybody is writing any doubt on chat, I may miss out. So just unmute yourself and talk. Okay. So the next thing that we spoke about yesterday were the components of return on equity. Can anybody again talk about the components of equity just like Sneha did? First was net profit margin, then was asset turnover, then was equity multiplier, right? So these were the three components through which here we measure the operating efficiency through the profit margin. Here we check the financial leverage, and here we check the asset use efficiency, right? Uh, can anybody tell me that what is the significance of return on equity? Can anyone tell me what is the significance of return on equity? I mean, why is this considered to be an important ratio? As I'm also looking at chat, if you want to write, then I'm looking at the screen right now. Yeah, can anyone tell me what is? Yeah, tell me.
Return on equity basically signifies that how what amount is shareholders getting, what percent of how efficiently the fund of the shareholder is being utilized in the business,
Okay.
and
Okay.
what kind of benefit at the end of the year they are getting.
Okay. So basically, return on equity is an effective indicator to understand how how effective the management is at using the equity financing to grow the particular company and generate return for the shareholders. So if I am an investor, I have invested in a particular company. Now, how efficiently is the amount or the fund that I have invested in a particular company? How effectively is that being utilized is what is told to us by return on equity. So guys, why I tell you the significance of every ratio is so that you try to understand it from the term only. जब हमने ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट की बात करी या ऑपरेटिंग प्रॉफिट की बात करी या नेट प्रॉफिट की बात करी, आई ट्राई टू टेल यू द मीनिंग एंड आई ऑल्सो ट्राई टू टेल यू कि कौन सा रेशियो कौन से एक्सपेंसेस कवर नहीं करता, सो दैट यू डोंट हैव टू मेमोराइज दीज थिंग्स. जस्ट ट्राई टू कॉन्सेप्चुअलाइज कि अच्छा रिटर्न ऑन इक्विटी है, सो दिस मीन्स इक्विटी शेयर होल्डर्स के फंड्स कितने एफिशिएंटली यूटिलाइज्ड हुए एंड क्या रिटर्न जनरेट हुई, राइट? So, guys, you all know the difference between equity shareholders and preference shareholders. Can anybody tell me what is the difference between equity and preference shareholders? Anybody?
Preference shareholders get a fixed dividend, but equity shareholders get a fixed dividend. It depends on the profit of the company.
Yes. So again, preference shareholders, by its name only, it says preference. So what does it mean? That between equity and preference shareholders have a preferential right. All right. Okay. Now we're going to talk about return on assets. So like I said, that return on equity. Wait, just hang on, guys. Have you written down the formula? Just write down the formula, then I'll proceed to the. Always write down the formula on a different sheet so that the more questions that you will practice, the easier it will be for you to remember these small concepts. Let me know once you've written it down. I'll move ahead. Just write on chat if you've written it down. Everybody's written down the formula? Okay. So guys, just the way I told you to relate the term return on equity and tell me what does it mean. Likewise, can you tell me what would return on assets mean? I was not asking you for the formula. I'm going to ask you for the meaning or the essence of that particular ratio.
How
Can
efficiently
anyone
we
tell?
use our assets to generate revenue?
Not to generate revenue, to generate returns.
Done, yeah.
Or to generate earnings. So always remember there is that revenue. Of course, earnings will only happen once the company is making revenue, but revenue is not equal to earnings. All right, or revenue is not equal to profits. All right, so return on assets is an indicator of how profitable a company is relative to its total assets, or how efficiently the management is using the assets to generate earnings. Or what if the management has just invested in assets which are generating no earnings for the company? So we divide the earnings, which is your net income, by the average total assets, and we get the return on assets ratio. All right. Now, next, I also want to tell you one thing, that return on assets is actually a very closely watched ratio by bankers, investors, creditors, etc. because this actually depicts the how the company is using the resources. If the company wants funds to, purchase assets or expand its business, etc., then this is one ratio which is very closely watched because it depicts how the company in the past has been using its existing resources and how efficiently it's been using it. All right. So it actually helps whether it's business analysts or bankers or investors to evaluate the company's profitability and effectiveness with respect to assets. All right. Okay. So, guys, I'll give you an example. My opening balance of assets is, say, 10 lakhs. My closing balance is 20 lakhs, and my net income is, say, can anybody tell me what is the answer? Can anybody tell me what is the return on asset? Guys, what is the return on assets? Let me know once it's done. Thirteen point three, yes, 13.3. Manisha, it'll be, I think you would have also got 13.33 only. So
Yes,
13.33
yes,
is, yes, so 13.3 is the correct answer. So basically, I want to tell you the significance of 13.3. It means that for every rupee, so this is in INR, that's in Indian rupees, it can be in any currency. So for every rupee that has been invested in assets during the year, that produced 13.3 of net income. All right. So I'm just telling you this so that you understand the significance of this answer 13.3, because ultimately, what does this signify? Every 1 rupee of investment in assets has been utilized to generate 13.3 rupees of income. Likewise, if this was return on equity, then it would be for every 1 rupee of equity investment. If this was, say, a return on equity ratio, wherein I would have given you equity component here and the answer was 13.3, that would mean that for every equity investment, every rupee of equity investment in the company, 13.3 annual earnings in the form of profit after tax has been generated. All right. I'll give you a return on equity example to understand this here. So say my net income, let me take it in dollars this time. This is 10 million. My equity is 20 million. Can anyone tell me what is the return on equity? It should take you 1 minute. No, not even 1 minute, 10 seconds. Can anyone tell me what is the return on equity? Yes, it's 50%. So basically 50% or $0.50 of profit for every $1. Did you guys understand this? So by 50%, what do I mean? Can anyone tell me? That 0.50 of profit has been generated for every dollar of shareholders' equity investment in the particular company. All right. Now, guys, the next ratio that we are going to talk about is return on capital employed. I want to ask you one thing, that what is the meaning of capital employed? Can anyone tell me what is return on capital employed? Is actually a very important accounting ratio which is used in finance, valuation, and accounting, and it actually helps in comparing the relative profitability of companies after we take into account the amount of capital employed. But before I go on to this, I want you to tell me what do you mean by capital employed?
Total amount of capital, including
Yes.
equity and
So,
debt.
yes. So till now, guys, when we spoke about return on equity, we were only talking about equity investment, right? But what about the investment through borrowed capital? So capital employed is nothing but the total amount of investment that has been made. Guys, please do not get confused between working capital and capital employed. Everybody knows that working capital are funds that are required to meet the day-to-day operations, and working capital is nothing but current assets minus current liabilities. Capital employed is the total amount of investment, with whether it is equity or it is debt or like it is a long-term financing. So it is, please do not get confused between these two terms. This is a financial ratio that measures a company's profitability and the efficiency with which its capital is employed. So this is a return or return on capital employed, meaning that what is the return on the capital employed of a particular company. So yeah. So it is actually, but it calculates percentage return of book value of total capital investment. What is the total capital investment? It is debt plus equity. All right. Guys, please keep noting down the formulas. It is nothing but how effectively is a company generating profits from its capital employed by comparing the net operating profit. One thing that I need you to keep in mind is that here we use the operating profit. We use earning before interest and taxes. We are not using profit after tax. Can anyone tell me uh, the formula of capital employed? What do you mean by capital employed? I told you that it was total funds. So there are two ways of looking at how you calculate capital employed. Cap Capital employed will be, either you can subtract current liabilities from total assets. That will give you the same thing as equity plus long-term liabilities. So you can calculate capital employed by any one of the two ways mentioned here, depending on what has been provided to you in the example. All right. Earning before interest and tax, we've already spoken. It's right here. So it will be nothing but profit after tax plus taxes and plus interest, right? So that will give you earning before interest and tax. Please remember that return on capital employed is a long-term profitability ratio because it shows how effectively assets are performing when we take into consideration long-term financing. We do not include current liabilities. Current liabilities is something that goes into the working capital turnover ratio. I am repeating myself so that you understand that you are not taking short-term financing in capital employed. All right. This actually takes into account two important calculations, that is your operating profit and that is your capital employed. All right. obviously a higher return. So always understand that in profitability ratios, it is needless for me to tell me that higher the ratios, the better it is. Obviously, higher profit margins better for the company, higher returns better for the company, right? So return on in capital employed is actually very, very useful in capital intensive industries. It is this is because unlike return on equity, which only focuses on common equity, this considers long-term financing as well. All right. Guys, now the next ratios that we are going to talk about are nothing but activity ratios. All right. So under activity or turnover ratios, we are going to talk about the following. Activity turnover ratios are actually nothing but to evaluate the efficiency of companies' management with respect to the turnover of fixed assets, debtor, creditor, and inventory. Can you all please note down that we will be covering these? No, Piyush, we will not include short-term borrowings. Guys, once you noted it down, just let me know. All right. So, guys, we are going to first talk about. I actually have not received any response. I hope you all have written this down. We are going to talk about the fixed assets turnover ratio. Now, please, everybody knows the meaning of turnover. We already discussed it, right? Fixed assets turnover will be nothing but sales divided by fixed assets. Fixed assets. Guys, you all know that turnover does not mean profit. Is anybody confused that turnover means profit? Turnover can be anything. It can be employee turnover, debtor turnover, creditor turnover. All right. So you can say that sales are your turnovers. So fixed assets turnover ratio is nothing but the measure of the return on the investment in fixed assets such as property, plant, equipment, machinery. Basically, long-term fixed assets. So it actually calculates how efficiently are those fixed assets being utilized to generate sales for a particular company. Guys, I am not talking about profit here. I am only talking about the fact that if I have invested in my business and purchased X amount of fixed assets, which are my long-term assets, with the expectation of them generating sales for me, this turnover ratio will help me understand how much sales did my particular organization produce with the machinery and equipment that is in place. All right. Again, investors, creditors, etc. use this formula to understand how well is the equipment being used, and especially in manufacturing industries where there is huge investment that is made in expensive machinery and purchase of long-term assets. So I am going to give you guys, just write down the formula, then I'm going to give you an example to do. Yeah. I hope you've noted it down. Should I proceed to the example? So guys, when I'm going to give you an example right now of fixed asset. Okay, so now I have three companies in front of me, which is say Facebook, LinkedIn, and I have Walmart. All right, my net revenue is say $508.9 million. This is 972, and this is 469,562. My fixed assets at the beginning of the year are 1475. This is 11, and this is 112324. My fixed assets at the end of the year are 2391, 187, 116681. Can you all please tell me what is the fixed asset turnover ratio for these three particular companies? Yes. What is the fixed assets turnover ratio for the three companies? Is it done? It shouldn't take so long, guys. What is the fixed asset turnover ratio? Please, guys, faster. What is the fixed? I'm going to ask someone, anyone now, because nobody is answering. Okay, Nancy, you tell me what is the fixed assets turnover ratio for the three companies? Nancy, guys, All right, Nancy is not answering. I'm gonna ask Swapnil. Swapnil, what is
Uh,
the okay, she's
can you
here.
just repeat the question? I'm so sorry. I just missed the conversation.
No problem. So this is the net revenue for Facebook, Walmart, and LinkedIn. And this is the these are the amount of fixed assets at the beginning and the end of the year. What is the fixed assets turnover ratio? Guys, we can't spend so much time per question.
For first, Siddharth here.
All right, hi Siddharth. Yeah.
First organization ratio is 2.63. For second, 6.43, and third, 4.09.
All right. 2.63, 6.44. All right. Rahul is saying 5.56. I'm not sure why Facebook is 5.56. So I think, Rahul, you must have divided either the assets at the end or assets at the beginning. You would have probably not taken. No, so you have to take average of the assets. So you're going to do nothing but and you're going to divide your revenue with the assets. Oh, yes, it is correctly said to be 2.63, 6.44 or 6.43. It's almost the same thing, and 4.10. All right. Rahul, can we discuss why yours is 5.56? Understood. Okay, great. Okay, so now guys, the next ratio that we are going to talk about is nothing but the debtor turnover ratio. So like we spoke about fixed assets turnover ratio, I'm trying to maintain a flow for you to understand, like, from gross profit to operating profit to net profit. Then we talked about return ratios. So the moment you understand one return ratio, चाहे मैं रिटर्न ऑन एसेट्स बोलूँ, रिटर्न ऑन इक्विटी बोलूँ, रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल बोलूँ, अगर आपको रिटर्न का मतलब समझ आ गया है तो आप वो तीनों रेशियोज कैलकुलेट यू विल डू इट वेरी इजीली. Similar way में when I have spoken about fixed asset turnover ratio, wherein I tell you how efficiently are those long-term fixed assets being utilized by the company to generate turnover. Please understand, turnover is not profit. Turnover is revenue. It is your sales. Okay. Debtor turnover ratio is nothing but पहली बात तो debtors will come into place only when there are credit sales. In my cash sales, I have no debtors. So debtor turnover ratio is nothing but your sales divided by average debtors. But I don't care about the formula. I want to tell you the meaning of this ratio. This is also known as the receivables turnover ratio. This is the ratio of net credit sales to average trade debtors, which is basically, I'll give you an example and then explain it to you. Suppose I have net credit sales of say $50,000, and my average debtors are $10,000. By the formula, can you tell me what is the debtors turnover ratio? I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to do this. It is so easy. 5, right. So my debtors turnover ratio is fine. Now fine, you got the answer. But what does this 5 mean? What is this 5 times? Firstly, guys, this ratio is expressed in number of times. This is not a ratio which is expressed in terms of percentage. All right. Profitability ratios are expressed in terms of percentage. This is expressed in number of times. So 5 times means that my net credit sales are 5 times of my average debtors, which means that 40,000 of 50,000 of my 50,000 sales were basically, how should I explain it here? Okay, let me tell you. Average debtors 5 times are being converted into cash. Got it? जब मेरे नेट क्रेडिट सेल्स 50,000 थे और मेरे एवरेज डेटर्स 10,000 थे, मतलब कि मेरी जो नेट सेल्स थी वो 5 टाइम थी मेरे डेटर्स के, और मेरे जो एवरेज डेटर्स है वो 5 टाइम्स कैश में कन्वर्ट हो रहे हैं. Now I want to ask you, I'll give you here, I'll give you another example. This will be 10, right? Okay. Now can anyone tell me that is a higher debtor turnover ratio better or a lower debtor turnover ratio is better? I've given you 3 examples. 5 times, 10 times, and 20 times. I want you to analyze these variables and tell me whether a higher debtor turnover ratio is better or a lower debtor turnover ratio is better. Okay, Siddharth and Sneha are saying higher, Rahul is saying lower. What about other people who are on the in the class? Piyush is saying lower, Swapnil is saying higher, Nancy is saying lower. All right. Can anyone tell me why is lower better? So guys, if you can typically tell me, sales credit हो या cash हो, company के लिए तो better ही है, चाहे कुछ भी higher हो. Ultimate objective is कि sales higher हो. So if you can clearly see, मेरे sales बढ़ रहे हैं, तो मेरा ratio ज़्यादा हो रहा है. सब चाहते हैं उनके डेटर्स कम हो ताकि कैश जल्दी से जल्दी आए. अगर आप इधर देख रहे हो तो मेरे जितने डेटर्स कम होते जा रहे हैं मेरा उतना रेशियो बढ़ता जा रहा है. हायर द रेशियो इज बेटर. व्हाई? बिकॉज इट मीन्स कि हम पैसे जल्दी कलेक्ट कर पा रहे हैं. ऑलराइट. लोअर डेटर टर्नओवर रेशियो वुड मीन दैट मेरे क्रेडिट सेल्स बहुत ज्यादा है, मेरे एवरेज डेटर्स मतलब मेरे एवरेज डेटर्स इन प्रोपोर्शन टू माय सेल्स बहुत ज्यादा है. आई नीड टू मैनेज माय डेटर्स मोर इफेक्टिवली. ऑलराइट. So higher the debtor turnover ratio, better it is. Now we're going to talk about the credit. Guys, sorry, I have not made you guys note down the formula. Please note it down. Note it down, guys. हो गया? Okay. Now we're going to talk about the creditor turnover ratio. Creditor turnover ratio is nothing like the way debtor turnover ratio is the ratio of net credit sales to average debtors. My creditor turnover ratio is nothing but my ratio of net credit purchases, right, to my average trade creditors. I'm just changing the terms so that you understand. It is nothing but cost of sales divided by average creditors. It establishes a relationship between my net credit purchases and average accounts payable. Accounts payable includes obviously your trade creditors and your bills payable. It helps us to understand the liquidity position of a company. What do you mean by liquidity position? कि कंपनी कितनी ज्यादा इजीली अपने क्रेडिटर्स को पे कर पा रही है. Lenders will only be interested if they know that the company has a good ability to pay off its creditors and pay off the creditors faster. Now tell me one thing, higher creditor better है या lower creditors better है? Can anyone tell me? Can you all calculate the creditors turnover ratio for me from here, please? Yes, higher is better because it means that we are being able to pay off the debts faster. Creditor turnover ratio, can you all please calculate? Till then, I'm also going to write down another question for you. Another example. So guys, can have you calculated the creditor turnover ratio? What is the creditor turnover ratio? It is 5. Okay. What about everybody else? Why is Manisha the only one and the fastest one to answer? I want everybody else also to be answering at the same pace, please. Okay. Yes, everybody has given me the right answers. Anybody else has an answer apart from 5? So this will be net credit purchases. Your net credit purchases is nothing but your total purchases minus your cash purchases minus your this thing, which is 3 lakhs, and your creditors turnover ratio is nothing but 3 lakhs divided by your average accounts, which will be 54 plus 5800, that is 60,000. Right? Now, can you all do the next example, please? Can you all please quickly calculate the debtors and the creditors turnover? I'm gonna tell everybody myself who's gonna answer. Now, Tejas is gonna tell me the answer, and Narayan is gonna tell me the answer. All right. Tejas and Narayana are going to tell me the answer to this question. What is my debtors turnover ratio or my receivables, trade receivables turnover ratio? Tejas is saying it's 0.12 is the debtors and creditors is 0.59. Okay, anyone else? Narayana, please tell me the answer. Narayana, and I'm going to ask someone else also. I'm going to ask Ishan and Arpit also to answer. Narayana, be fast. Please tell me what is the answer to this question. So guys, we're going to quickly do it as you all are not answering. Only Manisha and Rahul and Richa and all Siddharth and Sneha keep answering. I want see Swapnil's also answered. Guys, there's no harm in being wrong. Go wrong, but at least answer. Only then will you be able to do it correctly. 8.18 is absolutely right. Swapnil, how did you get 8.8? Can you explain? Swapnil, why don't you explain
So
how
we
you
have
got
included.
8.18?
So the revenue is 8,75,000, and the debtors comes to
Right.
bills receivable plus the debtors 48 plus 59. We divide 8.875 to 107.
Right. Can you tell me how you got 4.57? Because that is not the right answer. Piyush is saying 8.17. Yes, almost the same thing. Tejas, did you understand how it is not 0.12? Tejas, do you want us to explain or you got it? Or I'll do it for you.
Yeah, I got it.
See,
Actually, I did it the other way around.
you got it? You've got it, right? What you'll do is
Yes,
you will
yes.
divide the revenue with your trade debtors as well as your basically you will do an average trade receivable, right? So that will be your bills receivable plus your trade debtors. All right, guys, did you notice one thing when I spoke about debtors turnover ratio? Yes, I told you to divide the sales with average debtors, but when I went to creditor turnover ratio, I was asking you to divide your cost of sales, which is nothing but your net. Can anyone tell me actually what is your cost of sales? Can anyone tell me? So it is exactly the same as the cost of goods sold that we have earlier spoken about when you were talking about the, yes, Rahul Prabhu is absolutely right, Manisha is right, direct cost, right. So here we don't have any opening stock or closing stock. So how are we going to calculate the creditor turnover ratio? We're going to divide the purchases by the average of your creditors, which is 90,000, plus your bills payable, which is your 2,000. Is everybody on the same page? Okay. So guys, we are going to proceed to the next ratio, which is nothing but the inventory turnover ratio. So just like we spoke about debtors and creditors turnover ratio, now we're going to talk about inventory turnover ratio. Inventory turnover ratio is actually nothing but to understand how much money is tied up in the inventory for a particular organization. It is nothing but cost of sales divided by average inventory. Higher the ratio, okay, I'm not going to tell you whether higher, what does higher ratio mean. First, I need you to write down the formula. So, guys, do you know that inventory management is a very big task in organizations wherein huge amount of money is tied up in inventory? Like there are numerous techniques such as ABC costing, just-in-time costing, etc., to understand and to implement effective inventory management techniques. And there is no one shortcut to say this management technique is good for inventory. There are different techniques which may be relevant for different companies and they may work well for those companies. Obviously, it is a typical thing to say that when you buy a large amount of inventory in bulk, you naturally get those, this quantity discounts and economies of scale applies when you do this. But obviously, when you also buy higher quantities in bulk, it may also increase the risk of your, stock going obsolete or not being you're not being able to sell the amount of stock you've purchased, or a high amount of storage costs. So inventory management is something which is completely like in detail thought about, and then a plan has come up because like for example, I gave you the example of just in time technique. What does just in time technique mean? That barely any stock is kept with the organization. They just in time they purchase the stock at the time when they need it for selling. So this is a very risky technique, but it does, it does work effectively for some companies. But obviously, it has a risk of, losing sales because sometimes the stock may not be readily available. Then ABC technique is basically how you categorize your inventory into three categories depending on its importance with respect to sales, such as A, B, and C. So there are different categories. What inventory turnover ratio tells us is how much money is tied up in the stock, which is the inventory, and higher this ratio means the less inventory the firm is keeping in relation to its sales. Now, I will not comment and give you a single answer to say whether a high inventory turnover ratio is good or a low inventory turnover ratio is good, because it completely depends on the organization's ability to, if the organization is maintaining very less inventory and it can arrange for inventory just in time when it needs it, then that technique works for that organization. Or if an organization is maintaining huge amount of inventory and that works for that organization, so there is no fixed shortcut to say that a higher inventory turnover ratio is good or lower inventory turnover ratio is good. Obviously, you have to measure your advantages that you get through having a higher inventory. Hello. Yeah. So now, after talking about inventory turnover ratio, we are going to talk about inventory conversion period. Inventory conversion period is nothing but the period that is taken by a company in which the company must invest cash while it converts material into sale. Basically, It is a time period that is taken for the company to convert that stock, that is the inventory, that is the raw material, into a particular sale. Obviously, less. Okay, I'm not going to tell you. First, you write down the formula of inventory turnover and you write down the formula of inventory conversion period. So, inventory conversion period is nothing but 365 days divided by inventory turnover ratio. Now, I'll calculate it and we'll talk about whether it is what is better. So now when I told you the meaning of inventory conversion period, it is the time taken by a company to convert the materials into sale. Can you tell me whether which is a higher inventory turnover ratio better or is a lower inventory turnover ratio better? Sorry, inventory conversion period better. Can anybody tell me? Is a higher inventory conversion period better or a lower inventory? I am going to ask someone. Okay, Anirudh is saying lower. Sneha is saying higher. Why is higher
Turnover ratio.
inventory conversion period?
No, that should be lower because the lesser
Yes,
the time you to convert the
yes,
inventory to it's better.
yes, absolutely. So, guys, whenever you have confusion, now just write down amounts like this and analyze what worked better. This is a lower inventory conversion period, which means that my inventory in the same 365 days got converted faster, right, into sales. So, inventory turnover ratio period in case of companies which are, outsourcing the production completely, in those cases, this ratio is not very beneficial because obviously for them, either inventory conversion will either be zero or it will be barely an amount. So, you need to understand that different ratios will be applicable to different companies and you need to analyze them basis the particular company's requirement. All right. Now we're going to talk about the debtor collection period. Debtor, so just like we spoke about inventory conversion period, now debtor collection period is nothing but 365 days divided by a debtor turnover ratio. Okay, this is actually the amount of time that the company takes to collect cash from its trade debtors. All right. Now again, can you tell me higher is better or lower is better? इसको मैं debtor turnover कर देती हूँ. Tell me higher is better or lower is better? Yes, lower is better, obviously, because reducing time is shows that the management is very effective in collecting the debts from its trade debtors. Okay. Now we talk about creditors payment period, which is basically an average time which the company takes to settle the amount of accounts payable that it has. It is nothing but period is 365 divided by creditors turnover ratio. What is the average time that a company takes to settle the amount of debts? It is actually nothing but the credit period that is enjoyed by a particular company. Uh, the credit period of the debts that the company has taken. Can you all please note down the formula? Just note down both the formulas. And guys, we're going to take a short 5 minutes break. We are going to come back at 11:20 and start again. Just have water or quick coffee, and let's be back in another 7 minutes. All right. Hi, is everybody back? Should we start?
Hello.
Hi, is everybody back?
Uh, Hello, Divya.
Yeah. Tell me.
When we calculated creditors turnover ratio, you said that 4.57 was wrong. Can you explain once
Which one? Which question were we talking about?
this creditors turnover ratio? Because I did the exact same thing,
Uh,
4,20,000 divided
yeah.
by 92,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So that will be basically we divide your cost of goods sold by your average trade payables, which is your creditors and your bills payable, right? And your cost of goods sold is nothing but your opening stock plus purchases plus direct cost of production minus from purchases. So what you did was you divided 4,20,000 by 92,000. So that is right.
Yeah,
So
so
it is
that was exactly
4.5.
my answer. So that was
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
my
Oh,
answer.
I'm sorry. I actually am so sorry. This is the right answer. It is 4.57.
Okay,
So
okay, no
sorry.
worries. Thank
Right? I thought you've taken revenue. I thought you had done this. That's why I actually did not calculate it. I thought you'd done this, which is why I said it was the wrong answer. If you
you. Okay.
divided it with the cost of sales, which is the
Yeah, yeah,
purchases, you've done the right. Yeah.
yeah.
Great. So sorry.
Yeah. Okay, no problem.
Sorry. Actually, I just self-created this example, so I thought you've taken 875. This question was actually just to confuse you guys that whether you take this or not. Like that was the purpose of this question. Great. Okay, everybody is back. Great. So now just guys, we've already covered the activity ratios. We're going to talk about the cash cycle. Cash cycle is nothing but your inventory conversion period plus your debtor collection period minus your creditor payment period. It is actually nothing but a cash flow calculation which starts with how much time would inventory take to get it converted into sales, how fast are we collecting cash from debtors, and how effectively are we being able to pay cash to our creditors. All right. So everybody's understood these three parts, cash cycle. So please understand that in case of a manufacturing company, obviously there will be an inventory conversion period, debtor collection, creditor payment. But in case of a service company, it is not necessary that you have this variable. All right. This is very closely linked to the liquidity. Now, when we talk about liquidity, we are going to talk about another set of ratios, which is liquidity ratios. Can you all tell me what is the meaning of liquidity before we go on to the ratios? What does liquidity mean? Like you see so many banks, so many other organizations closing because of liquidity problems. What is liquidity? Liquidity is not cash conversion. Yes, it is. Arpit is right. It is the ability to meet your short-term liabilities. So, guys, one difference I want to highlight to you is that liquidity talks about short-term obligations. It does not talk about long-term obligations. Solvency talks about long-term obligations. Never confuse yourself to think liquidity talks about your long-term obligations. All right. So a lot of startups, a lot of companies also shut down because they are not even being able to manage their short-term obligations. All right. So liquidity ratios measures the ability of a company to meet its short-term debts or its short-term obligations. The three liquidity ratios that we are going to talk about today is current ratio, quick ratio, and cash ratio. Current ratio is nothing but how much current assets cover for the current liabilities that the organization has. Naturally, higher the current ratio, the better it is. And it is a liquidity and efficiency ratio which measures the firm's ability to meet its current liabilities through its current assets. Everybody knows what a current liability and current assets are. Can anyone tell me what is the current liability? Current liability are those liabilities which are due within the next 1 year, which means that does the firm have enough current assets to meet its current liabilities is what is depicted through current ratio. Uh, of course, the ideal current ratio is 2:1, so as to say that a minimum of twice of the current amount of current assets the company should have in place in comparison to its current liabilities. Current assets can be anything. It can be cash, cash and equivalents. It can be anything. All right. It means that companies with larger amount of current assets will be able to pay naturally its current liabilities more easily without selling its. So what, actually primary this thing I want to tell you is tomorrow tell me you guys want to take a loan for education, or you guys want to take a loan to buy a car, or you guys want to take a loan to buy a house. That all makes sense. But tomorrow will any of you take a loan to pay your electricity expense, or to pay for your fuel of the car, or to pay for your everyday short term expenses? No, right? No prudent person would take a long term loan to pay for its everyday expenses. So, likewise, a company will not want to take a long term debt to pay its current liabilities, or will not want to sell off its assets to pay its short term liabilities. All right. So, current ratio measures the ability of a firm to ensure that it has enough current assets to meet its current liabilities. Now, when we spoke about current ratio, now when I go to quick ratio, can anybody tell me what is the difference between current ratio and quick ratio? Quick ratio is also an indicator of the short-term liquidity. It is a measure of obviously the company's ability to meet its short-term obligation, but the difference between current and the quick ratio or acid test ratio is that it wants to measure the ability with its most liquid assets, which means assets which can be converted extremely easily into cash or are already in cash. So quick ratio or asset turnover ratio does not include prepaid expenses or inventory from its current assets. We exclude the prepaid expense or the current inventory from the current assets, and we get the quick ratio. All right. So inventory and prepaid expenses are included because excluded from current assets to calculate the quick ratio, because they will still take reasonably more time than the other quick assets to get converted into cash. All right. So for example, if a quick ratio is 0.5, then it means that the company has quick assets 0.5 times to basically to settle only 0.5 of its current liabilities, means the quick assets only cover half of the current liabilities instantly. All right. So now when we move on to the cash ratio is actually nothing but cash plus marketable securities divided by current liabilities. This actually indicates enough cash balances on hand to cover for the current liabilities. And if a company has a pathetic cash ratio, it is an indicator of whether the company is actually close to shutting down or not. All right. Guys, I know that this was just theoretical and I need to make you do examples. So guys, can you please note down the examples for current ratio and quick ratio? Have you all noted down the formula of quick ratio, current ratio? Yeah. Guys, what is your current ratio? What is your quick ratio? Two point five and 2.25. Okay, I have actually not solved this. Current ratio will be 1 lakh divided by this thing, and this will be 1 lakh minus 10,000. Yes, current ratio and quick ratio. Right. Now, can you all calculate here? Guys, I'm waiting. Guys, please write down the answers for it.
Madam, screen is not visible. Excel.
Can you all please You're saying current is 2.112. Okay, I've actually not calculated it, Tejas. I'll also calculate it with you guys only. Everybody else, please
Excel is
answer.
not visible, madam.
Oh, okay. So sorry. Two point 1.12 and 1.53. Okay. Manisha, why don't you explain how you're getting 2.12 and 1.53?
We calculated the current asset, which is 1,80,000. We have added trade receivable, prepaid expenses, cash and cash equivalents, and inventories. Okay, 1,80,000 is the current asset, and then we added, find out the current liabilities, which is 85,000. We have added sundry creditors, bills payable, and expenses payable.
This is your answer, right?
Yeah.
And here you subtract your
Prepaid expenses and inventory.
oh god, would be everything except your inventories, right?
Prepaid, uh,
Right?
but you have added prepaid expenses also, I think.
Where? Oh yeah, so sorry, so sorry. Then prepaid expenses will be excluded. It's 1.5. Can anybody tell me what is your current assets and your current liability? So your current ratio is 3.5 is to 1, which means your current assets divided by current liabilities. This is 3.5, this is 1. So your current assets is 3.5 of your current liabilities, or your current liabilities are current assets divided by 3.5, right? Your quick ratio means your quick assets, which is your current assets minus 24,000 divided by current liabilities. This is 2, this is 1. So your current assets minus 24,000 divided by 2 is equal to your current liabilities. So can anybody tell me what is your current asset and what is your current liability?
Current asset is 56,000, I think.
Yes, your current asset is 56,000 and your current liabilities
16,
is
16,000.
nothing but I think it will be 16,000, right?
Yes, yes.
Can anyone explain it to me how this happened? Richa has got it right, but I want someone else to explain it to me. Ishan or Piyush or Radha, can you explain how we've got this? Can anyone tell me how you got this, guys? So it's very easy. If you assume your current liabilities to be X, your current assets will be 3.5x and your quick assets would be, this is 2x, and your current assets minus quick assets is equal to inventory. So this will be 3.5x minus 2x, which will be equal to 24,000. So x will be 24,000 divided by 1.5. So your current liabilities are 16,000. Your current assets are 3.5 times of your current liabilities, so that is 56,000. Has everybody got it, or should I explain it again? Guys, did you get this particular question? Ishan. Guys, I'm waiting for everybody else also to answer. Okay, now I'm going to give you another example. Calculate the trade receivables turnover ratio, your total revenue operations is 4 lakh, your trade receivables at the beginning are say 40,000, this is 1,20,000, this is at the end. Can anybody tell me what is your trade receivables turnover ratio? Okay, how would you calculate this? This will be 4 lakhs divided by how did you guys get this? 4 lakh divided by 80,000. 5 times, yes, correct. Can you all tell me what is the creditors turnover or trade payable ratio? Swapnil and Manisha are saying 4. Ishan is saying 5. Let's wait for everybody else. Guys, what about everybody else? Only very few people have answered. So even I actually have not calculated the answer. It should be 12 lakh divided by average of this. Anirudh, why don't you explain? I have not spoken to you, I think, till now. Anirudh, why don't you explain the answer for this question? Anirudh? Hello? Anirudh, how is it 4? Can you explain? Or Piyush, why don't you explain how it is 4?
In creditor turnover ratio formula is net purchases divided by average credit. So we have to take
Right.
creditors at the beginning plus credit at the end divided by 2 plus bills payable at the end plus bills payable at the beginning divided by 2. We can
Right.
add this average divided by
Right.
credit purchases.
So 12 lakh divided by average of creditors and by average of bills payable, right? All right, so guys, this leads us to the end of the session. My colleague next week will be will be starting with solvency ratios and will take you through the balance ratio session. I hope today's session was good. I absolutely loved this class for being so interactive, and kudos to each one of you for being so fast in answering each of the questions. I hope I was helpful in solving minor doubts and you enjoyed this session. Stay safe and keep practicing as many questions as you want. And on a scale of 1 to 5, please rate this session. 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. Yeah. Is it visible, Siddharth? Which question do you want to note down? I have written this question here. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope I can take up another session of you in future as well. Bye. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Damini,
Thank you.
I am Damini. Thanks, Ishan. Thank you, Rahul, Sneha, Prabhu, Piyush, Radha. Thank you so much. Siddharth, thanks. Damini, I'm disconnecting. I'm leaving the meeting now. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.